There were many countries involved in the Cold War. Czech Republic, Cuba, Vietnam, and many other countries were involved. But the Cold War is the name given to the relationship that developed primarily between the USA and the USSR. The Cold War was a period of East-West competition and tension. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union stood on opposite sides of a conflict. Each side felt threatened by the other's political ideologies and beliefs, and both prepared for war. But both countries would never physically fight each other. As the tensions between the USSR and America increased, the amount of competition between the two countries grew immensely. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union endeavored to demonstrate their power. The space race served as an opportunity for the two nations to showcase their scientific and technological capabilities. Russia acted first in the space race by sending the first animal into space, the first satellite into space, and even the first person. America didn't want to be overshadowed by the accomplishments by the USSR, so on July 20th, 1969, the United States launched Apollo 11, which carried the first person to the moon.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
The launch of Apollo 11 reinstated America's capabilities in the scientific technological competition between both countries. A major aspect during the Cold War was the nuclear arms race. Both countries sought power and strength and felt threatened by each other. Building nuclear weapons was a way to demonstrate their power as well as a way to protect themselves. Both countries were eager to create long-range nuclear weapons that were accurate. They also wanted these missiles to be stored underground, protected from enemy attacks, and could be fired in under 30 seconds. The United States was far in front of the Soviet Union with regard to atomic weapons. By the 1950s, the U.S. developed Polaris submarines which could carry and fire nuclear missiles very accurately. The Soviet Union was very concerned about this because their nuclear weapons were not as advanced. The Cold War led to many competitions between the USSR and America. This competitive spirit also influenced the Olympics during this period. The USSR and America used the games as a platform to demonstrate the superiority of their respective political systems. The difference between the communist and democratic systems were demonstrated in how the USSR and America treated their athletes. For example, the Soviet Union paid all their winning athletes, and the US rearranged their Olympic Committee. Decolonization had a huge impact in the Cold War. Decolonization refers to the undo of colonialism and the establishment of governance or authority. Many countries such as America and Africa have gone through decolonization. Here's an example of Africa going through the aspects of decolonization. You can see here that over time, many African countries have achieved independence from various colonies and are being released from the status of different colonies. Unfortunately, many decolonized countries are still being controlled by outside governments and powers. For example, Southern Rhodesia had been given full internal self-government by the UK in 1923. Although by the terms of the Constitution, the United Kingdom retained the power to veto any legislation that has to do with African interests, there were many decolonized countries such as this one in Africa, which have gained their power and independence, but were still controlled. The tension between the Jews and the Arabs have caused conflicts in areas regarding a new Zionist state. But although the conflict is prominent, the Jewish people and the world acknowledge that they deserve their own state, the partition of Palestine for a Jewish state. The remaining Jews applied pressure on Britain because they controlled the region that the Jewish people wanted. However, the Arab countries surrounding it wanted the British to stop the Jewish immigration to Palestine entirely. The plan was accepted by the Israelites, but the Palestinians and Arabs rejected the entire proposal and threatened a war with the Israelites if they declared Israel a state. This land has called for dispute between the two regions that are claiming the land belongs to them. The Arabs have launched raids over cities showing their anger. Unfortunately, this was the beginning of the Israel and Arab dispute over the lands and other disagreements. The US and the USSR didn't physically fight in the war, but they did use mass propaganda against each other to promote fear and that they were so close to using nuclear weapons, although none were ever used. It was more or less of a psychological trend at the time, and the US and USSR were the only two superpower countries at the time, so it was more about them in competition. The Cold War had showed the world that big superpower countries that seek power and strength will most likely not fight each other due to nuclear weapons and its harsh effects, but will use smaller and weaker, decolonized countries to spread their own power and beliefs.